Truth be told, I was opposed to living with your father. I've been enduring it for a long time. Why bring this up now? The funeral just ended. I married you thinking I could lead a luxurious life in LA because your parents were wealthy. But without it and even living together with your dad, in the end, I had to help with caregiving. It really made me angry. Hearing my husband's true intentions, I was greatly shocked. Unable to speak from the shock, Kyle added, "I've been patient all this time. As a reward, give me your father's high-rise condo. It's only fair that I get that much." Wanting to push the conversation forward, he continued speaking briskly. "Listen, my parents are already selling their house to move here. Staying in a hotel for a long time will cost a fortune, so hand over the high-rise condo quickly." The high-rise condo that your mother mentioned earlier. Could it be? Realizing my husband's plan, I blurted that out. In response, Kyle smirked triumphantly. "Finally got it, huh? The high-rise condo you'll inherit is going to my parents. If you don't like it, let's get a divorce." He said this and handed me the divorce papers. "My name is Sophia. I work at a credit union in LA. I was in my mid-30s and had almost given up on marriage when I met Kyle. He was running a cafe in LA and was a client for the financing I was handling. Originally from the countryside, he pursued his dreams with the enthusiasm of a boy, his eyes sparkling as he passionately talked about what he wanted his shop to be like and what he wanted to achieve. Kyle was 4 years younger than me, and even after I was no longer handling his account, he would contact me personally, having developed romantic feelings for me. After several dates, we started dating and got married within 6 months, then began living together in an apartment. One day, I headed to my hometown for the first time in a while. Despite being only a 20-minute train ride away, it had been about half a year since I last visited. My mother passed away several years ago, and my nearly 70-year-old father was living alone. He seemed to enjoy his hobbies and didn't mind living alone, but he had recently slipped on the stairs. He insisted he was fine, but I was concerned and went to visit. When I arrived, the entrance was a mess, which was unimaginable for my neat freak father who wouldn't leave his shoes unaligned or packages lying around. When he came out of the room, he was smiling but limping, which surprised me. "Are you okay?" I asked worriedly as I approached him to ask how he was feeling. He seemed a bit embarrassed and replied, "It's probably my age, but I end up like this over little things. It's troubling how slowly I heal. Don't overdo it. Shall I carry these packages to your room? Is there anything else I can help with?" When I asked, my father scratched his head and said, "I'm sorry." Seeing my father after such a long time, he seemed visibly smaller than before. His limp made him appear frail. I couldn't help but worry about him living alone. With no close relatives nearby and my job to consider, commuting daily to my father's house was challenging. The thought of living together crossed my mind. However, this was not a decision I could make alone. That day, I prepared meals for a few days to ensure my father could rest comfortably and left my home. After returning home distressed, I shared my father's recent condition with Kyle, who had just come back. "He's nearly 70, huh? That must be tough." "Yes, it is. With his leg condition, I'm sure even shopping is a struggle. I wish I could go every day to check on him, but that's difficult." "True, your workplace is in the opposite direction. So, if it's okay with you, could we consider living with my dad?" Kyle looked surprised and his eyes widened. I couldn't tell if his reaction was positive or negative, and I felt a bit anxious. "I intend to contribute to the living expenses. There's no rent, and it would be closer to your cafe. My commute would be a bit longer, though, but I think there are no downsides for you." After saying this, Kyle remained silent, thinking it over. Finally, he clapped his hands decisively and said, "Let's live together." "Really?" "Yes. As you said, it might be good for me too. Most importantly, I'm worried about your father. If it eases your concerns, living together is a good choice." "Kyle, thank you." And so, we moved to my family home and started a new life with my father. My father owned a high-rise condo and had rental income, so he had a stable income even after retirement. He still had some retirement funds left, and he said we didn't need to pay rent or living expenses. Meanwhile, Kyle's cafe was not doing well, and his income was decreasing. Living with my father helped our finances, and I took on all household responsibilities as a way to give back. On weekends, I acted as a driver, taking my father to places he wanted to visit. Although his mobility was limited, my father, who had always been active, seemed to enjoy his lifestyle. "Next, I want to go here." During the weekdays, my father would research various places on his computer, seriously picking where to go on the weekend. When he decided, he always reported back to me with a smile. For me, going to the places my father was interested in became a highlight of my weekends, and a good relationship was established between Kyle, my father, and me. I felt the decision to live together was the right one. However, these peaceful days did not last. One day, my father fell indoors and became bedridden, not just limping anymore. It was then that Kyle began to show his true colors. I thought, Dad's lunch is still here. When I returned from work, I found my father's lunch, which I had prepared in the morning, left untouched in the kitchen, and I instantly had a bad feeling. I rushed to my father's room. Dad, what happened to your lunch? Are you feeling ill? Welcome back, Sophia. My condition is the same as usual. I'm fine. Did Kyle forget to prepare it again? Kyle is busy with his work. It's understandable he forgets. Despite my father defending him, I was upset with Kyle's recent behavior. This was not the first time Kyle had failed to serve my father's lunch. Since my father became bedridden and could no longer leave his room on his own, I had relied on Kyle, who started work later, to provide lunch for him. However, though my father required caregiving, Kyle was clearly reluctant in taking care of him, and he only helped a few times. After that, he began to refuse, making excuses, and neglecting my father. Even when I asked for help, Kyle's attitude did not change. On the contrary, he started to speak harshly. Why do I have to take care of your dad? But you agreed to live together, didn't you? But I never said I'd do caregiving. Since we started living together, Kyle had been receiving a significant amount of financial support from my father for his store. In such a situation, I was angry with my husband for complaining about caregiving and not showing gratitude. Moreover, complaints came from his parents too. We thought it was wonderful to live in a single-family home in LA, but to think you moved in together just to make Kyle take care of your father. What? I didn't mean that. Moving in was a decision made together with Kyle. Kyle said he accepted because you pushed him hard. I feel sorry for Kyle. You should manage your own parents' issues yourself. My mother-in-law shouted this and hung up the phone before I could argue. I was upset not only by Kyle's portrayal of our situation to his parents, but also by my mother-in-law's response. Despite knowing that my father had become bedridden, his parents did not offer any words of concern for his health or any appreciation for me. The call from my mother-in-law brought not only anger but also sadness. I thought, can I really consider them as family if they don't cooperate in such circumstances? Thinking this, I spent my days overwhelmed with work, household chores, and caring for my father. After a while, my father passed away. Although he used to enjoy going out, after becoming bedridden, he appeared cheerful but gradually became depressed and lost his appetite. Until the end, he acted cheerful, saying, "Don't worry, I'm fine," and concerned about whether I was getting along with Kyle. Looking back, I feel I burdened him greatly. After my father's funeral, regret continued to pierce my heart. I tormented myself with self-loathing, wondering if I could have done more, or if discussing things properly with Kyle could have spared my father the worry. At that moment, I heard the door open and looked towards the entrance. I thought it was Kyle returning home, but his parents followed him inside. I hurried to the entrance. Father or mother, thank you so much for coming all this way. Kyle's parents had traveled several hours by train from their home, staying at a hotel to attend the wake and funeral. I expressed my sincere gratitude. However, the response I received was unexpected. Don't mention it. More importantly, when would be a good time to move? We'd like to do it as soon as possible. I was confused, not understanding what they were talking about. But despite my confusion, my mother-in-law continued the conversation. I've always dreamed of living in the heart of the city. A high-rise condo, I never imagined it. It's like a dream, isn't it? Yes, the view must be amazing. I can hardly wait. My father-in-law replied with anticipation. I was bewildered by the sudden mention of moving and high-rise condo, unable to grasp the situation. Mom and Dad have always dreamed of living in a high-rise condo, Kyle said. As I remained silent, Kyle, frustrated by my lack of response, glared at me. Truth be told, I was opposed to living with your father. I've been enduring it for a long time. Why bring this up now? The funeral just ended. I married you thinking I could lead a luxurious life in LA because your parents were wealthy. But without it and even living together with your dad, in the end, I had to help with caregiving. It really made me angry. Hearing my husband's true intentions, I was greatly shocked. Unable to speak from the shock, Kyle added, I've been patient all this time. As a reward, give me your father's high-rise condo. It's only fair that I get that much. Reward? But you've received considerable support from my father too, right? That doesn't matter anymore. It was really helpful while it lasted. What? My anger rose as I felt my father was belittled, but Kyle seemed indifferent. Wanting to push the conversation forward, he continued speaking briskly. Listen, my parents are already selling their house to move here. Staying in a hotel for a long time will cost a fortune, so hand over the high-rise condo quickly. The high-rise condo that your mother mentioned earlier. Could it be? Realizing my husband's plan, I blurted that out. In response, Kyle smirked triumphantly. Finally got it, huh? The high-rise condo you'll inherit is going to my parents. If you don't like it, let's get a divorce. He said this and handed me the divorce papers. At the word divorce, something inside me snapped. I thought, I've reached my limit. Okay. What? Kyle looked unable to hide his surprise at my brisk reply. Hey, are you serious? You're saying you want to divorce? That's fine. I can imagine continuing to live with someone who married me for money and despises even the help my father gave. Just get out of my sight. I shouted loudly and snatched the divorce papers from Kyle. For a moment, he was taken aback, but he quickly regained his composure. Your father has passed away, and you're not thinking clearly. What? I'll give you 3 days to think it over. Make sure you don't regret this. With that, he left the house, taking his parents with him. 3 days later, as scheduled, Kyle and his parents showed up in front of the high-rise condo. They were trying to enter the condo without permission, but I had already taken precautions. When Kyle rang the intercom, someone appeared from inside the house. This will be ours from now on. Could you please leave quickly? Kyle was saying that politely, but his attitude conveyed disdain. However, the person calmly responded to Kyle, saying, I own this property. I cannot leave. That's impossible. My wife inherited this high-rise condo. It can't be yours. Unfortunately, what this person is saying is correct. Hot, Sophia. Surprised to see me emerge from behind the resident, Kyle was taken aback. I explained to Kyle, this person is Mr. Simpson, a friend of my father. He has been living here for a while, but it doesn't make sense for this to be his. It was originally your father's and you were supposed to inherit it, weren't you? This room has already been sold. What? Mr. Simpson had been living in the high-rise condo owned by my father for some time and had frequently visited our family home even after my father fell ill. After my father's death and learning Kyle's true intentions, I decided not to let things go his way and sold the high-rise condo to Mr. Simpson. When Kyle learned that, he flew into a rage, confronted me, and hurled insults. What are you deciding on your own? What about the place meant for my parents to live? Well, do you even realize what you've done? Do you think it's okay to make such a big decision without your husband's consent? We're not married anymore, are we? What? Surprised by my response, I calmly answered. You said if I didn't want to hand over the high-rise condo, we should get a divorce. That's invalid. You tricked us, so I won't divorce you until you've paid for your mistakes. If you say you'll buy back the high-rise condo for my parents, I might consider not getting a divorce. I was just dumbfounded by Kyle's claim. I regretted ever marrying such a self-centered person. Unfortunately, the divorce papers have already been submitted. You brought the filled-out divorce papers, didn't you? Also, I plan to sue you for compensation. Compensation? Don't joke. I haven't done anything to be sued for. At the word compensation, Kyle seemed to care less about the divorce and made a fuss. I was confident of my victory. Let me explain that in detail as a lawyer. Mr. Simpson, who turned out to be a lawyer, intervened in our tense situation. Kyle couldn't hide his surprise upon learning that Mr. Simpson was a lawyer. You have verbally abused Sophia, who was caring for her father, and even after her father's death, you aggressively pursued the inheritance, causing her mental distress. These actions are sufficient grounds for a claim for damages. That's a lie. In front of liar Mr. Simpson, Kyle found himself unable to respond. Behind him, his parents were also looking terrified. A few minutes of silence followed. Unable to bear the weight of the silence, Kyle appeared on the verge of tears. Wait, Sophia, I was wrong. I apologize, so please drop the claim for compensation. My plan was, I intended to clear my debts by giving the high-rise condo to my parents. Kyle pleaded, but it was no longer of any concern to me. As I silently stared at Kyle with a cold look, my former mother-in-law began to speak. Sophia, Kyle was wrong this time. We apologize, too. Could you please give us the condo? She seemed to have a strong desire for the high-rise condo, as she asked me with tears in her eyes. I'm asking you, too. Her husband added desperately, but my anger was not appeased. No matter how much my former husband and his parents apologized, my heart would not be swayed. Isn't it too convenient to apologize and seek forgiveness now? The condo is already Mr. Simpson's, and I will claim compensation. Please never show yourself in front of me again. As I spoke coldly, Mr. Simpson continued as if to support me. If you continue to stay here, we will have to call the police. Are you okay with that? All right, we're leaving. At the mention of the police, Kyle and his parents hurriedly left the condo. Months later, after a fallout with his parents due to differing stories, Kyle, with no sources of funding left and the cafe business continuing to worsen, found himself unable to borrow money from anywhere and eventually had to close down. Having lived a carefree life, Kyle searched for a job, but no place would hire him due to his self-centered nature, and he ended up bouncing between day jobs to scrape by. His parents started renting an apartment in the city with the money from the sold house, but their funds were quickly depleted due to high rent and living costs, and now they both are working part-time to make ends meet. I sold the family home, which was too large for me alone, and bought a new apartment. After the hectic days, I have finally settled down, and lately, I am slowly reclaiming my time. I am looking forward to finding hobbies and enriching my life, just like my father, who had many interests. When Eric, my husband, learned that I could not inherit my father's fortune, he flew into a rage. Wait, what? You won't inherit the money? Then you're of no use to me. I want a divorce. After that declaration, he quickly remarried my sister. I took my revenge on them. I am Angela. I am 32 years old and an employee at a general company. It's been 2 years since I married Eric. Our marriage was arranged by our relatives. Our family, while small, owned property, and my sister Mari and I were the only daughters without sons. Relatives were then naturally concerned about who would take over the estate, so they recommended a husband who didn't mind marrying into our family. After the marriage, Eric, who wasn't adopted into the family, started living with us at the family home. My mother passed away a few years ago. Since then, my father, my husband, and I have been maintaining the household. My husband was very kind-hearted, friendly to my father, and seemed to be an ideal person. However, the relative who introduced Eric had expressed a concern just before our marriage. It might seem strange to say this after I've introduced Eric to you, but he has a bit of an obsession with money, so be careful, they said. With the wedding imminent, it was troubling to hear this, but since Eric showed no outward signs of greed, I ignored my doubts and went ahead with the marriage. Even after we were married, I kept my relative's words in the back of my mind, but Eric didn't seem particularly obsessed with money. However, he did seem interested in my father's inheritance, casually asking about it, often when my father was having a drink. Since my father answered him frankly, I didn't worry much about it. My husband also had another interest, my sister. She was 5 years younger than me, and in contrast to my calm demeanor, she was lively and energetic, with a glamorous social life with men. We didn't look alike, so when my husband first met my sister, he was surprised and muttered, "Your sister has a completely different vibe from you, doesn't she?" Seeing my husband looking at my beautiful sister, who had clear, distinct features, stirred complex emotions in me. The relatives had introduced Eric to me because they were concerned that if I, being introverted and unnoticeable, did not marry, there would be no one to carry on the family. At the time, I felt that such worries were unnecessary because I had a beautiful and popular sister, but over time, I came to understand why the relatives were so concerned. My father doted on my sister, and after she graduated from high school, he let her go to college and then to vocational school. She didn't have a clear goal for further education. She just wanted to avoid working. On the other hand, my mother was strict with her. She urged my sister to get a job immediately after college. But my father overruled my mother and allowed my sister to go to vocational school. After graduating from vocational school, my sister got a job through one of my father's acquaintances, but quit after just half a year. Her reason for leaving was surprising. I can't make use of my skills at that company. My mother and I were astonished that my sister was speaking as if she completely understood the nature of the work, despite only being there half a year. But for some reason, my father believed her story, found another company, and helped her get rehired. When my sister got used to her new job, my mother became ill and needed to be hospitalized. While my mother was in the hospital, my sister visited her every day and started taking more days off work. Eventually, she quit her job, claiming she would take care of our mother. However, her nursing was mostly chatting with my mother or playing with her smartphone in the waiting room. I took care of my mother, did the laundry, and replaced things. My sister was of no help. For my mother, having someone to talk to might have been a comfort, but a month after the hospitalization, her condition worsened and she could no longer speak. Less than 2 weeks after her condition worsened, my mother passed away. With the sudden passing, my father and sister were out of it, so I had to make the funeral arrangements. Our relatives helped, and we somehow managed to take care of things. After losing our mother, my sister started working part-time and moved out to live on her own. With only the income from her part-time job, she couldn't make ends meet, so our father paid for her rent, utilities, etc., while she seemed to use the money for leisure. When funds ran short, she would visit our father to receive more pocket money. Because our mother was strict, my father had not given my sister an allowance while our mother was still alive, but now he seemed to give it without hesitation. I took it lightly, thinking that if my father and sister were happy with it, then things were fine. Even after I started living at my parents' house with my husband, my father continued to give my sister an allowance. At that time, I hadn't realized that my sister was also seeking financial support from my husband, and he seemed happy to oblige. Keep this a secret from Angela. She might get jealous if she finds out, my husband told my sister. My sister happily worked part-time and lived off the money she received from our father and my husband. But such a lifestyle couldn't last forever. My father fell ill and had to be hospitalized. I visited the hospital in between work to take care of him, but my sister never showed up. Instead, she started contacting me, demanding money. I need you to give me the money Dad used to give me every month. The rent and utilities are being paid from his account, after all. My sister's angry tone surprised me, and I was surprised when I found this out. I was annoyed at her for only caring about her own finances instead of being worried about our father's condition. I wanted to end the call, but since she seemed lost, I asked her about the amount our father used to give her. How much are you receiving from Dad each month? Hurry up and find a job and then live on the money you earn from that. She replied with dissatisfaction. Don't tell me that again and again. I'm getting $1,000 every month. The rent and stuff are separate. I was astounded when she confidently disclosed the amount. If an adult were given such an amount every month, it's unlikely they would have the motivation to take work seriously. Although my father was hospitalized, I believed he would recover soon, so I didn't think giving her money was a big issue. However, my father's condition suddenly worsened, and I had to urgently contact our relatives. The doctors told us the situation was serious, and I was deeply shocked by the news. I wanted my husband's support at such a time, but he hardly came to the hospital, citing work reasons. And when he did come, he would ask inappropriate questions like, "Is your father's inheritance large? Will you and your sister split it since you're the only children?" I was at a loss for words with a husband who showed interest only in my father's inheritance. The relatives' warning that my husband was money-hungry became a reality, and I felt disgusted. When I answered my sister's call and told her about our father's critical condition, she again prioritized her finances. "Well, anyway, make sure the monthly payment comes through." "I can't live without that money," she said, and the call ended there. While feeling indignant at my sister's words, I also became concerned about the male voice I faintly heard on the other end of the phone. It was a familiar voice, which made me feel uneasy. A month later, my father passed away, but my sister and husband didn't show up until the end. I had experienced the burden of preparing for a funeral during my mother's passing, and now I felt it again. To make matters worse, my husband and sister didn't offer any help, and my sister didn't even attend the funeral. My husband attended, but left immediately after, saying he had work. The relative who had introduced me to my husband noticed his absence and asked me, "Isn't your husband supposed to be here?" Isn't it odd for the main person in mourning to be absent? All I could do was respond with a wry smile. I guess he's busy with work and had to leave, I said. Hearing my response, the relative sighed, but I also felt a deep desire to sigh. After my father's funeral ended quietly, and I had a moment of relief, my husband asked me with a smirk, "Finally, huh? So how much will you inherit? Even half would be a substantial amount, right?" As the relatives had warned me before the marriage, it seemed that my husband's mind was filled with thoughts of my father's fortune. Disappointed in his inappropriate remarks, I responded casually, "My sister gets $10 million and I get nothing." Legal consultations hadn't even started, and I had yet to sort out my feelings just after the funeral. Seeing my husband gleefully talk about the inheritance, I couldn't help but laugh out of anger. Taking my words seriously, my husband immediately raised his voice. "What, you can't inherit the fortune? Then you're of no use to me. I want a divorce." I felt the same way and gladly agreed to his proposal. "That's fine. It's clear that you married me for my father's inheritance from the start. I'll gladly divorce you." I shouted this as I thrust the already prepared divorce papers at him. Caught off guard that I had the divorce papers already, my husband was a bit shaken, but quickly signed them. As he left the house, he said, "I'm divorcing you, who got zero from the inheritance, to remarry your sister Mary and get $10 million. Unaffected by his words, I immediately went to the legal office and filed for divorce. In the end, I was able to cut ties with a heartless man who was only obsessed with money. The next day, my ex-husband rushed to submit a marriage registration to marry my sister. A few days later, he called me. Still believing the previous story, he raised his voice. "When will the inheritance division begin? Hurry up and give Mary $10 million. I was quietly waiting for his call. I had no intention of going out of my way to contact him after he left the house. I responded to my ex-husband in a business-like tone. "Let's meet at our house this Sunday. I'll be waiting to discuss things then." My ex-husband, believing he was to receive an inheritance, seemed ecstatic after hanging up. However, the thought of seeing his reaction when he learned the actual facts was a sort of pleasure for me. When the weekend came and my ex-husband and sister arrived at our family home, they were surprised to find that I had invited a lawyer. But my ex-husband began to speak as if he were still satisfied. Of course, when inheriting a large sum of money, the presence of a lawyer is required. The lawyer then began to speak to my ex-husband with a puzzled look. "There is the matter of the inheritance. But before that, there is the issue of the compensation claim from Angela to you, Eric." As he said this, he showed him some photos. The photos captured my ex-husband leaving my sister's house, with the dates clearly marked. The lawyer continued to explain in detail to my ex-husband. "Here are photos that serve as evidence of infidelity before the divorce was finalized. Therefore, a payment for compensation is necessary." I had overheard my ex-husband and sister discussing the inheritance over my sister's phone, and immediately hired a lawyer to investigate my ex-husband's infidelity. While I was busy with my father's funeral, my ex-husband and sister had been meeting frequently at her home, and as a result, we were able to obtain many incriminating photos. The topic of inheritance division changed to a demand for compensation, leaving my ex-husband and sister speechless. But my ex-husband quickly retorted, "Compensation is trivial compared to $10 million inheritance. I will pay it immediately." He said this confidently, and when the lawyer presented the demand for compensation, he signed without hesitating. Witnessing his signature, I declared to my ex-husband, "I hope you find happiness with a sister who has no inheritance. Now that you've signed, you'll certainly be paying compensation." My sister was dumbstruck upon learning there was no inheritance. "What do you mean I don't have an inheritance? I heard it was $10 million. My ex-husband also became red with indignation. "It's impossible, there's no inheritance. I won't let you have all of it." The lawyer began to explain the facts calmly to this furious couple. "Miss Mary is actually the daughter of your mother's previous husband and not legally related to your recently deceased father. As there was no adoption, she's not entitled to the inheritance. I explained the situation to my confused sister. "You were too young to remember when our father and mother remarried. But I remember it well. I was 6 years old when our parents married, and I still remember the joy of having a new sister. What I never imagined was that this sister would one day take away my husband." Our young parents had their struggles, and I recall the people around them supporting their remarriage. My mother loved me as her own, and my father cared for my sister. Perhaps my father was especially considerate of her because she wasn't his biological daughter. They both had children from previous partners when they remarried. But my mother refused to adopt my sister with my father due to suspicions from relatives who thought she was after the father's wealth. The relatives urged me to marry quickly because they knew I was the only one who could inherit the father's property. There were no children between my father and mother, which may have been fortunate. If they had had children together, the inheritance issue would have been even more complicated. They probably avoided having children together to prevent such disputes. Now that it was clear my sister had no right to an inheritance, I understood why my father had always supported her. I had no legal adoption between my mother and I, but it never crossed my mind in day-to-day living. It seems our parents never told my sister about their remarriage, and she was learning the truth for the first time now. My ex-husband's expression, which had been filled with anger earlier, turned pale as he realized he wouldn't get the expected inheritance from my sister, and that his earlier signature would force him to pay compensation. With a pale face, he asked me, "Was what you said before, my sister gets $10 million and I get nothing, a lie?" Trying not to laugh, I answered, "Of course it was a lie. It was retaliation for your infidelity. Besides, my father's estate couldn't possibly be worth $10 million. Even if my father was a property owner, there was no way he had an inheritance of $10 million. My sister, who had been quiet for a long time, suddenly spoke up. "I did a lot of shopping relying on Dad's inheritance. And what about the money Dad used to send to me until now? Will you take care of it, big sister?" To my meek sister, I replied, "You already have a dependable husband in Eric, so you don't need any more help, do you? He should be taking care of you." My sister was staring at her pale-faced ex-husband, but he shook his head. "I, too, have squandered a lot, expecting the inheritance from my father-in-law. I'm not in a position to help. I have my own overwhelming problems, like compensation." After saying this, he suddenly fell to his knees at my feet and began desperately apologizing. "Angela, I am truly sorry. It was all my mistake. Please forgive me and let me have another chance." The lawyer, preparing to leave, could not hide his laughter. The once arrogant attitude was gone, and now the sight of my husband groveling was almost comical. After the discussion, my ex-husband and sister left the house dejectedly and seemed to quickly finalize their divorce. For my ex-husband, who had remarried for the sake of my sister's inheritance, there was no longer any interest. As he had told my sister, he now owed me compensation and could not take care of her. Since he had no property, I decided to receive compensation from his salary in installments. The lawyer advised that this method would prevent any loss from non-payment. Meanwhile, my sister, having lost our father's support, had to make ends meet with daily part-time jobs, but she could not repay her debts and eventually went bankrupt. After she left the apartment she lived in, no one knew where she went. My father had provided financial support for my sister out of love, but such indulgence probably stinted her desire to work. Since I started to live alone at my parents' house, relatives have tried to introduce me to another marriage partner, but I refused. I want to avoid being introduced to a man like the last one, and next time, I plan to be careful and find a man to share my life with on my own.